My 6-year-old son told me something on a Tuesday afternoon, just casually, the way kids say things, like it was nothing, like he was telling me what he had for lunch. He said Nanny Sarah used to take pictures of us every day, because Daddy asked her to. I stopped what I was doing. I looked at him and I said, very carefully, very slowly, "What do you mean, buddy? What kind of pictures?" He shrugged. "All kinds," he said, "of us, of the house, of you." "Of you? That was 14 months ago? Let me tell you what happened before that Tuesday, and what happened after. My name is Lauren. I'm 36 years old. I live in San Francisco, California, or I did, in the version of my life that existed before all of this. I still live in the city, but not in that house, not in that neighborhood, not anywhere near it. I grew up in Portland, middle child of 3. My parents were both teachers, the kind of household where dinner table conversation was about books and current events and whether you had been kind to someone that day. Not wealthy, comfortable, warm. The kind of childhood I did not fully appreciate until I was an adult trying to build something similar for my own kid. I moved to San Francisco at 24 for a job at a tech company, product management, the kind of work that sounds more glamorous than it is. I was good at it. I am still good at it. I have a particular talent for looking at complicated systems and finding where they break down, which is either a professional skill or a personality flaw, depending on the context. I met my husband at 28. His name is Ryan. I'm going to try to talk about Ryan the way I talk about everything else in this story, factually, without unnecessary editorializing, with as much honesty as I can manage. That is harder with Ryan than with anyone else in this story, but I am going to try. Ryan was 32 when we met. Tall, blonde. The kind of easy confidence that comes from growing up in a family where things generally worked out. His father was a venture capitalist. His mother sat on 2 nonprofit boards. He had gone to Stanford, as a matter of course, the way some people go to the local state school. Not because it was a reach, but because it was simply the next expected thing. He was charming, genuinely charming. Not the performed kind, the real kind. The kind that makes you feel like the most interesting person in the room when he's talking to you. I fell for it completely. We dated for 2 years, got engaged, got married in a small ceremony in Marin County when I was 30 and he was 34. My parents flew down from Portland. His parents threw us a second reception at their home in Atherton that had more people at it than our actual wedding and cost more than my parents' first car. I remember standing in the middle of that reception, looking around at all those people I didn't know and feeling not ungrateful, exactly. Just slightly outside of something, like I was watching my own life through glass. Ryan squeezed my hand at some point that night and said, "You okay?" I said, "Of course, it's wonderful." He smiled and moved off to talk to someone, and I stood there with my champagne. And I told myself that feeling was just nerves, adjustment, learning a new family. Jack was born when I was 32. He is the best thing that has ever happened to me. I say that without qualification. Whatever else came apart, Jack did not. Jack is whole and loved and entirely unaware of most of what I'm about to tell you, and I intend to keep it that way for as long as I possibly can. When Jack was 18 months old, I went back to work full-time. Ryan worked long hours, venture capital hours, which meant early mornings and late evenings and occasional weekends when something important was closing. We needed childcare that was reliable and consistent and present. A daycare didn't feel right for a child that young. We decided on a nanny. We interviewed 11 people. Sarah was the 8th. She was 26. Originally from Ohio. She had a degree in early childhood education and 3 years of nanny experience with 2 different families in the city. both of whom gave her references so glowing they almost felt scripted. She was warm and calm and got down on the floor to play with Jack within 3 minutes of arriving at our house, which told me more than any reference could. We hired her that week. For 3 years, she was, I want to be precise here, she was good at her job. Genuinely good. Jack loved her. He called her Nanny Sarah with a particular brightness in his voice that told you the association was entirely positive. She was punctual and communicative and handled the inevitable sick days and schedule changes with a flexibility that I genuinely appreciated. I liked her. I want to say that clearly because what comes later is easier to understand if you know that I liked her. I trusted her. She was in my home every day. She knew where we kept the spare keys and the medicine cabinet and the Wi-Fi password and every corner of our life that a person who is present for 40 hours a week inevitably comes to know. I trusted her the way you trust someone who takes care of your child. Completely. The decision to let her go had nothing to do with any of this. I want to be clear about that too. What happened was simpler and more mundane. Ryan's mother had retired from her board positions and had announced, with the particular certainty of a woman who had never been told no, that she wanted to be more present in Jack's life. She had offered to cover the child care hours. It was framed as a gift. It was also, in the way of certain gifts, not entirely optional. I gave Sarah 2 months' notice, a generous severance, a reference I meant every word of. She left on a Friday in September. Jack cried. I felt guilty about it for weeks. 2 weeks later is when Jack told me about the pictures. We were in the kitchen after school. He was eating a snack, apple slices, the way he always had after school. And he was talking about his day the way 6-year-olds talk about their days, which is in a completely nonlinear way that requires you to hold several apparently unrelated threads simultaneously and trust that they will eventually connect. And then, in the middle of telling me something about his friend at school, he just said it. Nanny Sarah used to take pictures of us every day, because Daddy asked her to. I put down what I was doing. I turned to look at him. He was still eating his apple slices. I said, "What do you mean, buddy? What kind of pictures?" "All kinds," he said. "Of us, of the house, of you." "Of me?" "Yeah." He picked up another apple slice. "She had a special camera, not her phone. A little one. She kept it in her bag." I stood very still. "Did she ever tell you why?" I asked, very carefully. He shook his head. "She just said it was a project. For Daddy." "A project for Daddy?" I said, "Okay, buddy, thanks for telling me." And then I finished making his snack and I sat with him while he ate it. And I asked about his friend from school and I listened to the answer and I did not let my face show a single thing. But inside, something had shifted. Something quiet and specific and very cold. Because I thought about the little camera in the bag. And I thought about 3 years. And I thought about my husband, who worked venture capital hours and came home late, and squeezed my hand at parties, and smiled his genuine, charming smile. And I thought, what exactly was the project? That night after Jack was in bed, I went to the room Sarah had used as her office space, a small room off the kitchen. She had kept her bag in there, her extra supplies, a changing table we hadn't moved yet. I don't know what I expected to find. She had been gone for 2 weeks. Whatever had been in that room, she had taken it with her, or almost all of it. Because in the back of the closet, pushed behind a box of Jack's old toys, was something she had left behind. And what it contained changed everything I thought I knew about the last 3 years of my life. Everything. It was a small black case, the kind that camera equipment comes in. Rigid plastic, foam insert inside, the sort of thing you buy specifically to protect something you don't want damaged. about the size of a shoebox, pushed to the very back of the closet behind a box of Jack's old board books and a bag of outgrown winter clothes I had been meaning to donate for 6 months. I almost missed it. I had gone through that closet quickly the first time, just a surface scan, looking for anything obviously out of place. Nothing had caught my eye, but something made me go back. Some instinct I don't know how to name. The same instinct that makes you check the door twice, even when you're sure you locked it. I pulled everything out of the closet. The case was at the very back, pushed flat against the wall. I sat down on the floor with it in my lap. I opened it. Inside, a camera. Small, as Jack had described. A compact digital camera, the kind that looks almost like a large USB drive. The kind that is designed, I would later learn, to be discreet. The kind that fits easily in a bag or a pocket or a kitchen drawer without drawing attention. Beside it, in the foam insert, a memory card, already removed from the camera and sitting separately, which told me someone had been deliberate about this, had used this camera, removed the card, and then left both here. Whether by accident or intention, I couldn't tell. I held the memory card for a moment. Then I went to my office and got my laptop and found the card reader I used for my own camera. And I sat on the floor of that small room off the kitchen, and I inserted the card. The folder opened. 1,847 photographs. I stared at that number. 1,847. I opened the first one. My kitchen, taken from the corner near the window. The angle you would have if you were standing near the counter where Sarah usually prepped Jack's snacks. The photograph was dated 18 months ago. A Tuesday. I was in it, standing at the stove with my back to the camera, making dinner, completely unaware. I opened the next one, the living room, Jack playing on the floor, dated the same week, the next, the front hallway, my coat on the hook, my bag on the bench, the mail on the table. An ordinary Tuesday in my ordinary house, captured from an angle that was careful and specific and entirely without my knowledge. I went through them slowly at first, then faster. The photographs spanned, I checked the dates carefully, 2 years and 4 months, starting approximately 6 months after Sarah began working for us and continuing until 3 weeks before she left. 2 years and 4 months of photographs of my home, my son, my daily life, me. There were photographs of rooms I hadn't expected. The master bedroom doorway, never inside, always from the hall, but the doorway. The home office where I worked when I was at home. The garage, the backyard. There were photographs of me that I don't know how to explain this exactly. They were not inappropriate in the way people might assume. They were just surveillance. That is the only word for it. Me leaving the house, in the morning. Me getting home in the evening. Me in the kitchen, the living room, the backyard with Jack. Me on my phone. Me at my laptop. Me simply existing in my own home without any idea that it was being documented. 1,847 times. I sat on the floor of that small room for a long time. And then I did something that I have thought about since, whether it was the right move or whether I should have done something different. I closed the laptop. I put the memory card back in the case. I put the case back in the closet exactly where I had found it. And I went to bed. Ryan was already asleep. I lay in the dark next to him and I stared at the ceiling. And I thought about the word Jack had used. Project. Daddy's project. I thought about Ryan. About the venture capital hours. About the way he was sometimes on his phone in the evenings, in a way that felt slightly turned away from me. Not dramatically, just slightly. The way a person orients themselves away from something they are not talking about. I had noticed it, filed it away as work stress. as the particular distraction of a man whose job required constant availability. I lay there, and I rearranged that observation in light of what I had just seen. In the morning, I did two things. The first thing I did was call my sister in Portland. Dana is 3 years older than me, and is the person I call when I need to think out loud. I told her what Jack had said. I told her about the camera case. I told her about the 1,847 photographs. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Lauren, you need to look at his phone." I said, "I can't just look at his phone." She said, "You absolutely can. He photographed you in your own home for 2 years without telling you. You can look at his phone." She wasn't wrong. The second thing I did was call a woman named Patricia Cho, a family law attorney I had been referred to 3 years earlier when a colleague was going through a divorce and had needed a recommendation. I had never expected to need the number myself. I had put it in my contacts and forgotten about it. I hadn't forgotten it. Patricia answered on the third ring. I told her briefly what I had found. She told me to come in that afternoon and to bring the camera and the memory card and to not discuss any of this with my husband before we spoke. I went to see Patricia that afternoon while Jack was at school. She was in her early 50s, sharp, precise, the kind of woman who has heard a lot of things and is not easily rattled. She looked at the camera. She scrolled through a portion of the photographs. She asked me several careful questions about the timeline, about Sarah, about Ryan's behavior over the past 2 to 3 years. Then she said, "Lauren, I want to ask you something directly, and I need you to think carefully before you answer." I said, "Okay. Is there any reason at all, that your husband might want documentation of your daily life? Your movements, your habits, your interactions with your son?" I started to say no. And then I stopped. Because there was something Ryan had said 8 months ago during a disagreement, one of those conversations that start about one thing and become about something larger without you quite deciding to let that happen. It had gotten heated. And at one point, Ryan had said, very quietly, very controlled, in the way that quiet and controlled can be more alarming than loud, "I just want to make sure I know what's going on in my own home." I had thought it was frustration, the kind of thing people say when they feel disconnected and don't know how to articulate it cleanly. I told Patricia what he had said. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, "Lauren, I think we need to talk about what your husband might be preparing for." I looked at her. "Preparing for what?" I said. She folded her hands on the desk. "Has he ever mentioned divorce?" she said. "Even casually, even once?" I thought about it, and I remembered something. 18 months ago, a Sunday morning, we had been talking, again, one of those conversations that starts about logistics and becomes about something else. And Ryan had said, almost offhandedly, almost like it wasn't the thing he was actually saying, "I just think it's important that we both know where we stand, in case anything ever changes." I had let it go. I had told myself it was nothing. I looked at Patricia Cho across her desk, and I understood for the first time what the project was. Patricia walked me through it carefully. The photographs, the timeline, Ryan's comment about knowing what goes on in his own home. She said, "Lauren, in a custody dispute, documentation of a parent's daily behavior, habits, and home environment can be used as evidence." I sat very still. "He's building a case," I said. Patricia looked at me steadily. "I think," she said carefully, "he has been building one for 2 years. 2 years. Sarah had been in my home for 3, which meant he had started 6 months after we hired her. 6 months after he had found someone with access to my daily life, someone who could document everything, someone my son called Nanny Sarah, with brightness in his voice, someone I had trusted completely. I drove home from Patricia's office in a particular kind of silence. Not the silence of someone who doesn't know what to think, the silence of someone who knows exactly what to think and is not ready to finish thinking it yet. 2 years. Ryan had spent 2 years building a case against me, documenting my daily life through a woman I had hired to take care of my child, a woman I had trusted, a woman Jack loved. I thought about the 11 people we had interviewed for the nanny position. I thought about how Ryan had been the one to suggest we expand the search, how he had found Sarah's profile on the agency website, how he had said, I remember this now with a clarity I didn't have at the time, "This one looks promising. Why don't we bring her in?" I had thought he was being helpful. I pulled into our driveway and sat in the car for a while. Then I went inside and I picked up Jack from the neighbor who had collected him from school, and I made dinner and I gave Jack his bath and I put him to bed and I read him 2 chapters of his book and I kissed him goodnight. And then I went to find Ryan's phone. I want to be clear that I had never done this before. In 8 years of being with Ryan, I had never once looked through his phone. It had never felt necessary. I had trusted him the way you trust someone you have built a life with. Not naively, just genuinely. That version of trust was gone. He was in his office. The door was half open. I could hear him on a call, a business from the sound of it, the particular cadence of his work voice. I went to the bedroom. His phone was on the nightstand where he always left it when he was on his laptop. I picked it up. His passcode was Jack's birthday. It had always been Jack's birthday. I typed it in. It opened. I went to his messages first. He had a thread with Sarah. I want to say that carefully, a thread. Not just a few messages. A thread going back 2 years and 4 months. The full duration of whatever this was. I scrolled to the beginning. The early messages were practical, scheduling, updates on Jack, the normal communication between an employer and a caregiver. Nothing alarming on the surface. But about 6 months in, the tone shifted. Ryan, did you get the shots from Tuesday? Sarah, yes, kitchen and backyard. Also got her leaving in the morning. Ryan, good. Angle okay? Sarah, fine. She never looks toward that corner. I read that exchange 3 times. She never looks toward that corner. My kitchen. The corner near the window where Sarah usually prepped snacks. Where I had never thought to look. Where I had stood with my back to the camera, making dinner 100 times without knowing. She never looks toward that corner. I kept reading. The messages continued in that pattern. Ryan asking about specific photographs, specific angles, specific days. Sarah confirming, occasionally flagging things she had noticed. Sarah. She had someone over today. Woman I didn't recognize. They were in the living room for about an hour. Ryan. Do you know who? Sarah. No, but I got photos. Ryan. Good. I sat on the edge of our bed reading this exchange, and I thought about every person who had come to our house in the past 2 years. Every friend, every family member, every repair person, every neighbor who had stopped in. All of it documented, all of it filed away. For what? I kept scrolling. The answer came about 14 months ago. A message from Ryan to Sarah that was longer than the others, more specific. He wrote, and I'm going to tell you what it said because I think you need to understand the full shape of this. He wrote that he was consulting with his attorney about next steps, that the documentation they had gathered would be important for establishing patterns of behavior, that he needed a few more months of material before he was ready to move. Patterns of behavior. Establishing patterns. I sat with that language for a long time because I understood what it meant. Ryan was not documenting me because he suspected me of something. He was documenting me to create the appearance of something, to build a record that could be interpreted by a family court judge, by a custody evaluator, as evidence of whatever narrative he decided to construct. It was not about what I had done. It was about what he could make it look like I had done. I put the phone back exactly where I had found it. I went to the guest bathroom, and I sat on the edge of the tub, and I breathed for a while. And then I called Patricia Cho. It was 9:30 at night. She answered. I told her about the messages. I told her about the thread. I told her about Ryan's message regarding his attorney and next steps and patterns of behavior. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Lauren, I need you to do something tonight before you do anything else. I need you to document those messages. Screenshot every single one. Send them to an email address he doesn't have access to. Can you do that?" I said I could. "And then," she said, "I need you to act completely normal for the next few days. Can you do that?" I thought about the past 2 weeks, the dinners, the bedtime routines, the ordinary texture of a life that had been anything but ordinary underneath. "Yes," I said. "I can do that." I went back to the bedroom. Ryan was still in his office. I picked up his phone. I photographed every message in that thread, 2 years and 4 months of them, and sent them to an email account I created in 3 minutes on my own phone, an account Ryan had never heard of and would never think to look for. Then I put his phone back. Then I went to bed. Ryan came in an hour later. He got into bed. He said goodnight. He was asleep in 10 minutes. I lay there and I thought about Sarah, about the fact that she had done this, had come into my home and taken care of my son, and documented my life for 2 years, for a man who was paying her to help him take that son away from me. I thought about Jack saying her name with brightness in his voice, and I felt something that I don't entirely have a clean word for. Not just anger, though the anger was there, enormous and cold. Something underneath the anger, something that had to do with the specific violation of having your child used as cover for something like this, of having his love for someone weaponized. That was the part I couldn't make okay. The next morning I called Patricia back. She had already spoken to a colleague who specialized in digital forensics. He could preserve the messages on Ryan's phone in a legally admissible format. She had also made some initial inquiries about Sarah's employment history, specifically whether she had done this before, with other families. She had a preliminary answer on that by noon. She called me. She said, "Lauren, Sarah has worked for 4 families in San Francisco over the past 6 years. I've made contact with 2 of the other families." I waited. "In both cases," Patricia said carefully, "the marriages ended in divorce within 18 months of her employment ending." The room was very quiet. "And in both cases," she continued, "the father received primary custody." I sat down. "She's done this before," I said. "It appears so," Patricia said. I thought about the agency website, Ryan finding her profile, suggesting we bring her in. "Patricia," I said slowly, "how did Ryan find Sarah?" A pause. "That," she said, "is exactly the right question." Patricia's forensic contact pulled Ryan's emails that week. It took 4 days. And what he found answered the question of how Ryan found Sarah. He hadn't found her on an agency website. He had been referred to her by his attorney, the same attorney he had been consulting about custody documentation for 2 years. Sarah wasn't a nanny who got pulled into something. She was part of the plan from the beginning, from before the beginning. And there was one more thing in those emails, one more thing that I was not prepared for. A name I recognized, someone I had considered for the entire duration of my marriage. A friend. The name in the email was Diane Marsh. Diane had been my friend for 6 years. We had met through a mutual colleague at a tech conference in 2018. One of those instant connections where you talk for 3 hours at a networking event and leave thinking this person is going to be in my life for a long time. She had been in my life for a long time. She had been at my baby shower. She had visited us in the hospital when Jack was born. She had sat at my kitchen table more times than I could count, drinking coffee, listening to me talk about my marriage, my work, my life. She was also, according to Ryan's emails, the person who had introduced him to Sarah and to his attorney, and had been, for reasons that took Patricia's team several more days to fully understand, actively involved in the documentation strategy from the beginning. I need to pause here, because I think people expect this is where I fell apart. It's not. I had been falling apart quietly for a week already. By the time Patricia told me about Diane, I had already done most of my grieving. For the marriage, for the version of Ryan I had believed in, for the particular safety of a home that had turned out to be anything but safe. What I felt when I heard Diane's name was not devastation. It was the particular cold clarity of a picture finally coming into focus. Diane had introduced Ryan to an attorney who specialized in high-conflict custody cases before he had any reason to need one. She had connected him with Sarah, not an agency nanny, but a woman who had done this before, who knew exactly how to move through a family home without drawing attention, who had a track record of outcomes that benefited the father. Why? That question took longer to answer. The short version, and I'm giving you the short version because the longer version involves details that are still part of an ongoing legal matter, is that Diane and Ryan had been involved with each other for approximately 2 years, beginning, as best as Patricia's team could establish, around the same time the documentation of my daily life began. They had not been careful enough with their communications. People rarely are. Patricia presented everything to Ryan's attorney on a Thursday morning. I was not in the room. I was at a coffee shop in the Mission District with Jack, who was eating a chocolate croissant and telling me about a dream he'd had about dinosaurs, completely unaware that 4 miles away, his father's legal strategy was collapsing in real time. I drank my coffee. I listened to the dinosaur dream. I thought, this is what I am protecting. This right here. This boy and his chocolate croissant and his complete trust that the world is safe and his mother is present and everything is fine. Everything was going to be fine. Ryan called me that afternoon. He said he wanted to talk. I said, I think we should let our attorneys do the talking from here. A pause. Then, Lauren, I'm sorry. I thought about 1,847 photographs, about the thread on his phone, about Sarah in my kitchen for 3 years, with a small camera in her bag, about Diane sitting at my table drinking my coffee, listening to me describe the difficulties of my marriage, and reporting back. I said, I know you are. And I hung up. The divorce took 11 months. Ryan's custody strategy collapsed almost entirely once Patricia introduced the evidence of the coordinated documentation campaign. His attorney, the same attorney who had referred him to Sarah, quietly withdrew from the case 3 weeks in, which told me that attorney had understood very clearly what the exposure was. Ryan retained new counsel. The settlement gave me primary physical custody of Jack. Ryan has visitation, regular, structured, appropriate. Jack sees his father. Jack loves his father. I have not said a single negative word about Ryan to Jack, and I do not intend to. Jack is 6 years old. The shape of his relationship with his father is something he will work out for himself over time, with information I am not going to provide prematurely. That is the hardest part. Not the divorce, not the settlement. The daily work of protecting a 6-year-old from the knowledge that the adults around him failed him. Sarah was not charged criminally. Patricia looked into it, the photography, the documentation, the coordination with Ryan's attorney. The legal landscape around what she had done was complicated enough that prosecution was unlikely to succeed. She is, as far as I know, still working as a nanny somewhere in the Bay Area. I think about that sometimes. I think about whatever family she is with right now, whatever kitchen she stands in, whatever corner she has identified that the mother never looks toward. I reported everything I knew to the agency she had worked through. Whether they acted on it, I cannot tell you. Diane, I have not spoken to since the day Patricia showed me her name in Ryan's emails. I don't imagine I will. I sold the house in November, bought a smaller place in a different neighborhood, still San Francisco, still the city I chose at 24 and still love. Jack started at a new school in January and has already made 2 friends he talks about constantly, and has declared that his teacher is the funniest person he has ever met. He is okay. That is the thing I come back to when the rest of it gets heavy. He is okay. Some mornings I drop him at school and I watch him run through the gate without looking back. The particular confidence of a child who has never had a reason to doubt that the place he is going is safe. And I stand there on the sidewalk for a moment after he disappears inside. And I think, that is what it was all for. Not the settlement, not the legal victory, not any of the things that felt important in the middle of all of it. That boy running through that gate without looking back, that is everything. That's the whole story, or the part I'm ready to tell. I want to say something to anyone listening who is in the middle of something like this right now. The people who betray you, they count on you not looking. They count on the corner you never look toward. Look toward it. Whatever it is in your life, look toward it. You might not like what you find, but you will be better off knowing. I promise you that. Thanks for listening.